Most of us were never taught how our nervous system actually works. We weren't taught that it's a literal Wi-Fi receiver for energies and frequencies. We were taught fear. We were taught to be afraid. We were taught to live in a state of constant worry. This shocks the nervous system and shapes our reality. I'm going to show you guys some simple methods that you can actually take, apply to your life, and see results quick. Childhood conditioning. Everything starts when we're young. Everything starts as a child, obviously, right? The heart's first in conception, and then everything else develops, including our nervous system. A child is at a state of theta waves. That means that they absorb everything. It's like a blank slate. That's the blessing that we get when we come into this universe, is we have a blank slate to create our personality, to create our uniqueness, to create what we want to be in this life. But most of us didn't choose that. Most of us went to school every day. Most of us went to whatever church or whatever religion our parents were into. Most of us saw our parents go through issues. My family got divorced. We had trauma. We had things that were instilled in us at a very young age. Most authoritative things like school, religion, everything in nature of that bases things off of following rules, off of punishment if you don't. Because fear is a fast way the brain learns. It remembers it. So it's the easiest way to keep people in line and to keep people following the rules. You don't want a bunch of kids acting crazy in a classroom. You don't want a bunch of people, running around wild, not following the rules. But what are the real rules? What is the truth that we were supposed to be taught as opposed to what we were taught? I don't believe that most people even know what they're teaching, unfortunately, and it's not really an opinion anymore. It's the fact that there's so much factual proof now that the education system, certain factors in religion, things of that nature, there were a lot of things changed and a lot of things distorted for power, for control. So this is the key, is you're going to have to reprogram yourself. You're going to have to declutter all of the useless information. How many times have we said, man, I didn't even use anything I was taught in school in life, right? Or, people nowadays look back and they're just like, what was I learning? What really mattered from all that? And it's 99.9% emotional. All the emotions, all the triggers, all of the things that really mattered is in our daily lives. How we communicate, how we react to situations, and this is where the fear comes in. And I'm going to get into my story with you guys so you can know I can relate. My life has been nothing but what I projected. I was constantly worried. I was constantly afraid. I was constantly in fear because that's all I knew. All I was expecting was what's going to happen next. What thing bad is going to come down in threes, right? Because they happen in threes. What's going to happen next? And guess what? It always happened. And that's because your nervous system is literally like a Wi-Fi router. You literally have to look at that as the connection to everything. And when I mean everything, I'm talking about quantum physics at this point. And that's another topic we're going to get into as well. But they've proven that everything in the universe is connected by an invisible matrix. They won a Nobel Prize proving this. So it's not a debate anymore. And this goes back to Carnegie, Henry Ford, John D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan. All of these people use this method. They observe their thoughts. They regulate their nervous system. They don't allow negativity and stress and fear to control their lives, so they are able to create what they want. You go from a primal fear state to a creative state. And there's some simple tactics and some simple methods that you can apply to see this happen very quickly. This goes back to, any kind of self-help programs or, any kind of, I had struggled with drug addiction, depression, anxiety, anything you can name, I had in my life. And I'm not using it as comparison or bragging about it, obviously, but I want you guys to know that I can relate, and I'm being vulnerable with you and telling you I had to struggle for 35 years. It seems like I'm 35 years old now, and I'm just now getting it, but it's been in my face the whole time. Everything starts with your thoughts. Everything starts with your mind, your brain, your nervous system. This is why the laws of attraction work. This is why prayer works. This is why manifestation works. It's because when you sit there and you think about it and you feel it, and that emotion, the heart is aligned with your brain, you have to have coherence between that, then you will create that. So if we're constantly afraid, we're constantly stressed, we're constantly worried, and we're thinking positive and we're trying to change our lives, you're sending out mixed signals. That's why you get the push and pull, and that's why people give up. But it's because we're so deeply programmed, we're so deeply conditioned that we can't get out of it. That voice in our head is constantly just screaming, yelling, saying, no, that's not going to happen. It's going to be bad, but it's not. And I'm going to show you guys some simple ways and simple methods that you can apply this. Systems often rely on punishment over curiosity, obedience over self-trust, scarcity over abundance. Now, fear in the nervous system. Let me explain this. Chronic fear is your nervous system stuck in fight or flight mode. It's your primal mode. That is what our ancestors used to survive thousands of years ago. For example, if you see a shadow in the corner of your eye, you get scared automatically. It's in our DNA, literally. And that's something else they've proven. A dysregulated nervous system is constantly scanning for danger. It's expecting loss, and it repeats emotional patterns, even the painful ones. So every time we sit there and dwell on anxiety, stress, negativity, it makes it worse. It's a snowball effect. And that's what you're creating in your life constantly over and over and over. And I'm living proof of it. When your nervous system is stuck in survival mode, your body is preparing for threat. You're not preparing to create. So I'm going to say that again. When your nervous system is stuck in survival mode, you're not preparing for anything other than what is going to be bad that happens next. What's coming down to screw up my life next, right? So trauma, patterns equal manifestation, okay? Trauma teaches the body what's normal. The brain seeks familiarity, not happiness. It seeks to be comfortable. It wants to be familiar with the situation. So we've regulated ourselves to be familiar with pain, anxiety, stress, fear, by the news, by the media, by everything that we were taught in our lives. Look around. Look on TV, look at the news, look at what we watch, look at the music that we listen to. Everything is generated to cause some sort of fear. Financial stress, emotional chaos, same relationships with the same negative people. We unconsciously create these things in our everyday life based off of that trauma and off of that fear. Here's the good news is, once again, I'm going to get into everything that's happened to me. I can't even begin to start now, but I'll give you a quick overlay. My parents got divorced when I was young. My dad went to federal prison. My mom had a lot of issues with anxiety, depression. Everything in my life changed overnight when I was 10 years old. From that point moving forward, I started thinking I had anxiety. I started being fearful. I started being afraid. It was right during 9/11. When 9/11 happened, I was like, holy shit, this is getting real, and I'm 10 years old at this point. And I didn't think about that until now, but everything in my life was based off of trauma and fear growing up. That's why I was insecure. That's why I was afraid. That's why I always was nervous and wondering if people were thinking about me or judging me, or, I was judging other people. It was my insecurities based off of fear and trauma as a child. And I know a lot of you guys can relate with that. It's a fact. It's scientific proof. It's not my opinion. Now, here's the thing. You're not broken. You were trained. Okay? You're not out of whack. You're in a transitional period. You're at a pivotal point right now to where you can be retrained. You can reprogram everything, and you can really start applying this to see the benefits. Manifestation isn't about positive thinking. That's the biggest key. It's about regulating your nervous system so your body feels safe enough to receive something different. So let me explain, right? People always do these affirmations, and that's a good way to program yourself, so that way that voice in your head is nothing but positivity. But think about this. If you want to be successful, abundant, wealthy, right? Even if you only have $1,000 in your bank account, but you're constantly sitting there saying, damn, I'm almost out of money. I got to be very careful about how I spend this, but I'm gonna manifest money. I'm rich, I'm wealthy, I am abundant. But you're stressing, you're checking your apps, you're wondering about bills, you're stressing. It's sending out mixed signals. You cannot manifest anything with a broken nervous system. It's literally your Wi-Fi router. I'm going to say that again. How annoying. My Wi-Fi in my house went out the other day, and it's pretty annoying, but it's a perfect analogy. It's like the universe did that to show me this for your first episode, is that with that thing broken, you're not going to connect to anything. The only thing you're going to connect to is the same stuff that's already there. All the negativity, the anxiety, the fear, all of that. So I'm going to try to teach you guys how I applied this. And you have to sit there and you have to feel the emotion. Gratitude is the number one thing to raise your vibration and your frequency. That will help regulate your nervous system. So what I do is I had to really start doing these box breathing techniques. I would inhale for 4 or 5 seconds, hold it 4 or 5 seconds, release 4 or 5 seconds, hold it, and then repeat the process. So 4 or 5 seconds, hold, 4 or 5 seconds, release, 4 or 5 seconds, hold, 4 or 5 seconds. You get the idea. But that puts your body in a state of relaxation, and it shows you're safe. Because if you're not panicking, running around, freaking out, obviously, you're okay. You're in a safe environment, and you're able to focus on your breathing. That's the first step. The second step is you're going to have to change what you put into your everyday life. I used to listen to nothing but trap music. I used to watch nothing but violent stuff, scary stuff, all day, nonstop. That's all I did. Scrolling on Facebook, Instagram, watching conspiracy theories. We'll get into those too. I love them. But it did nothing but cause fear. It did nothing but help me manifest negativity into my life. And I've never been more at peace. I've never been more serene. And I've never been more spiritually connected than I am now. And all I want to do is help people. From where I've come from the point of where I was facing 3 life sentences in Florida State Prison. I fought a case for over 4 years to where every day I woke up wondering how long I was going to go to prison for. And I'll get into that and explain it all. But I was miserable. I was lost. And no wonder. It started when I was a child. It started with all of my fear, all of the trauma. These things go down through our bloodline. It's in our DNA. There's generational curses. There's DNA activation that occurs in our lives. And you can look that up as well, and I'm going to show you guys about it. But, the only thing I want to do is seriously help guide you guys. Now, the thing is we really can work together by getting along, being happy, loving each other, caring about each other, things of that nature. But you have to start with yourself.